never sang along together. Our distance may have been because she was tired and stressed from work.
Hey everyone, Charlie here. I hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to One Cup of Japan. It's the show where we have a conversation over something good that soothes you. This morning we are drinking coffee with almond milk because I'm fancy. Anyway, we're here for the first time in a long time in the apartment doing one of these just because, well, A, it's been super rainy for, I don't know, like 3 days or something like that. And perhaps more importantly, the COVID situation continues, and so best not to go out too much, although when I do go on the One Cuppas, I don't really see many people, except for school children who like to start conversations. But anyway, what we're going to do today, since we're in this kind of situation where we can sit and kind of maybe not be distracted by things too much, is I wanted to go ahead and kind of take a couple questions from you guys who are kind enough to send me such questions. And I want to talk through those things. Also want to give you a little bit of update on the COVID situation here in Japan as I see it. And that'll be it for today, I think, as we work on our coffee here. For those of you who are new to the channel, the idea of One Cup of Japan is basically it's a video podcast. Normally, I guess normally we walk around and I show you different things, different sites here in Japan, buildings, temples, flowers, whatever I find to be interesting, and hope that you'll be finding interesting too. So these are long form, they tend to be rambly because they're meant to be kind of a conversation, so hopefully that is your thing. So to get started today, basically the COVID situation here continues in a way that's kind of troubling to me, at least, in that people don't really seem to be all that bothered about it. This is anecdotal, of course, but I will ask people, are you changing your lifestyle? Are you staying at home to avoid getting sick? Yeah, no, not really. I think part of it is the fact that here in Fukui, up until last week, there were only 3 people who had been confirmed with the virus, and now there are 30 people here who have it, so maybe things are changing, but there is generally a feeling of like, well, I mean, I guess it's bad in places like Tokyo and places like New York and places that aren't here. But yeah, generally the reaction has been less than inspiring, I think. So my opinion, as it has been, is that things are going to, particularly here in April, are probably going to turn out to be a lot worse than people know them to be currently. So let's hop into our first question here. Let's see, I'll take them, I guess, how should I take them, in order of how quickly I can answer them, I guess. This question is from Baker on Twitter. Thank you for your question, Baker. They ask, at what point in your, let's see, Baker is, I don't know, but it seems they're playing Animal Crossing, good on you. Fun, relaxing game to play through in these times of being trapped in your apartment, for sure. So he or she asks, at what point in your time living in Japan did you feel completely settled in? Was there an event that brought on the feeling, or did it just gradually start to feel like home? Oh, so this is my 6th year on this stretch living here. It's my 7th year total. And I think maybe the first 2 years I felt like a complete stranger. It was really difficult to make friends. I didn't know what I wanted really to do here, other I knew that I wanted to be here and that I wanted to teach. I knew those 2 things. But I didn't know, for example, like what my hobbies were going to be here. If I was going to stay here or any of that kind of thing, and so it kind of felt like I was just like a long-term tourist in a sense. Because of course, you know, I left everything in the States, my family, my friends, and everything like that, and so having none of that here, except from the occasional, like, you know, Skype call or messages or something like that, was very, very difficult. And in some ways it felt like, I don't know, it felt like I lost that, like, everything. I said that I didn't really know what my hobbies were going to be. And of course I knew I still liked things like hiking, and I knew I liked reading and writing and all that jazz, but I didn't know if those things were going to continue because it felt like things were so foreign to me, and I was I was in such a different circumstance and had to act in such different ways in certain instances that I just you know, of course, it affected how I felt about myself too. So I'm trying to answer these a little bit quickly. I'm sorry for clearing my throat. It is the morning time, so do forgive me. The morning time. But as for when I felt completely settled, I think it wouldn't have been until completely settled, or mostly settled, I guess, would be maybe my third year. I had made, towards the end of my third year, I had made friends, local friends. I had my normal places, my normal bar that I would go to if I needed a drink. I knew all the local trails in my area. I knew the restaurants I liked. I knew where to buy like imported food when I was feeling homesick and that kind of thing. And people here generally treated me like I was just part of just like anybody else, you know. If I saw them in the morning, we'd say good morning. Whereas before it felt like, you know, nobody really wanted to talk to me, that kind of thing. But as for, you know, also I just felt comfortable. I guess when I moved here, this is tied to this idea of feeling like a long-term tourist. I felt like I always needed to be doing something. Like every weekend, okay, this weekend I'm gonna go to Osaka and see such and such, and the next weekend I'll go to Kyoto and see such, and so on and so forth. And I guess I was living my life as though every single weekend needed to bring with it like a new tourist attraction or something new to see. As opposed to just being comfortable enough to be like, you know what, yes, I'm living in a different place, but this is my home, you know. And I think part of that kind of acceptance from other people, like getting normal good mornings and having normal just like bullshit small talk things when you see people who you see every day when you're walking to the grocery store or something like that, was that kind of acceptance of it in myself, of my not being transient, you know, of my being like, okay, well, now it's in my head that I am here for the long haul, and I plan to be here for the long haul and all that kind of thing. And I think that comes through, you know, and I think that's really, really important if you want to be settled in. But as for if there was any single event, I think, which was like maybe the latter half of that question, was there an event that brought on the feeling, or just gradually start to feel like home? There was no event. There was no event for sure. I think maybe just, actually recently I was thinking about this, where I felt like, oh, I'm really quite comfortable here, and all the good things and bad things that comfort brings with it, as we were talking about when I was talking about changing my job situation. So, I hope that answers your question. We did it in 3-4 minutes, which I guess is something of a record for someone who talks as much as I do. But yeah, I hope that answers your question, and thanks again for that question, Baker. Let's continue on to our next question from Wash Your Hands with Soap, aka Wikipedia, which is, by the way, excellent handle, excellent advice. It's something that I think particularly the men over the age of 30 here need to hear, because they never seem to wash their hands when they go to the bathroom. Of course, I don't watch women when they go in the bathroom, so anyway, things are creepy. So, Emily asks, Wikipedia asks, do you feel like yourself when communicating in Japanese? Or is some of your personality, like sense of humor, lost? I feel this too has been something of an evolution, I think. Because well, short answer is yes. I do feel like I'm a different, I communicate differently, and some parts of my personality are either suppressed or lost entirely when I speak Japanese. But there's like certain like aesthetic things, I suppose, that change. Like there's certainly recently there's been a new coworker who I've begun working with, who said, oh, when you speak Japanese, your voice gets lower and you become kind of more masculine, I guess. Nobody, I think, really considers me a terribly masculine person, which is fine. But I guess when I speak Japanese, maybe like the way I speak is a little bit more forceful, I think. That's one thing. But also, although it's forceful, I'm also the volume. When I say volume, I mean amount. The amount which I speak is probably less, because even now, I mentioned before that probably my daily life is 90% Japanese, right? because of my personal situation. But even now, for me, particularly when I'm in a situation with people I don't know, or I'm in like a professional situation, I really want to make sure that I'm thinking about my words really carefully. And so I speak a lot less. I speak a lot more. I speak more slowly, for sure. And yeah, I think that's it's been one of the benefits with when I speak English too, is I think it's kind of carried over into English, where I'm much more willing to think about my words before they come out of my mouth. Because generally, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a little bit verbose person, so they just sort of blah, 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 come out of my face. As for my sense of humor, yes, for sure. It's something that I've tried to translate directly into Japanese, and it does not go over very well. One thing that I hear kind of often from my partner in particular is like "kuso tsumaranai," which means that's so fucking lame or so fucking boring. That's not funny at all. That kind of thing, right? That kind of thing. But yeah, otherwise, although I speak more forcefully or more masculinely, I suppose, I'm much more careful with my words and much more measured with my words. And I think honestly, I'm much more humble. I think. I don't know if it's an American thing or just my personality is one to be like a little bit kind of self-aggrandizing is not the word I'm looking for, but it starts with a P. Linguistic de-skilling in action here, folks. Pretentious. I'm a pretentious person. Let's be honest. I think you all know it. But yeah, I am pretentious, but in English, I'm pretentious. I think. And in Japanese, for whatever reason, I'm much more humble and I'm much more realistic about my ability and all that kind of thing. I don't know why, but that is what it is. So I hope that answers the question. I hope so. Do you feel like yourself when communicating? I will say that I think I am. One thing I should mention is I think because of the kind of reaction, for example, in English, when somebody asks you like how you're doing and you know, I don't know, even like my friends ask me how I'm doing. If I feel if they're my friend, I'm willing to of course to be honest with them and to tell them whatever, you know, and to, you know, try not to belabor the point, try not to be self-pitying and all that kind of thing, but tell them the situation and be honest about it and that kind of thing. But I think when I speak Japanese, I am much more, what could I say? I draw the shape of a problem, if that makes sense, right? I say, well, you know, recently there's been such and such happening, and so has done this thing and all that kind of thing. And so I guess maybe I paint. There's a thing where like you can understand that something exists by what's around it, right? Maybe you can't see the thing, but basically by something's absence you can tell it's there, right? So that's kind of, I think something that happens in Japanese is like maybe you allude to a problem, but you're not too straightforward about it, because a lot of times it's not that people don't care, it's that they want to know why that you're involving them in a situation and causing trouble for them that doesn't really, you know, it's nothing to do with them, that kind of thing. Particularly in business, and certainly in business, that's a big thing. And it's something that I try to avoid, so I try to be much less open. Particularly recently, it's kind of a tangent, but it's connected, I think, like, well, it's not actually so connected at all, but but recently I've stopped being so open about like travel plans. Of course, I'm not traveling recently, but a little while ago my partner and I went to Universal Studios, and I was sort of bemoaning the fact, I was like, oh God, well, you know, we're spending money on this to go on a trip together, that kind of thing. But why do I have to worry about sorry, I thought we were getting another question on Twitter as we speak. Why do I have to worry about buying omiyage or like the souvenirs for my coworkers, that kind of thing? So bemoaning that fact. which actually generally I don't mind it so much. But she was like, I don't even know why you tell your coworkers you're going someplace, right? Which is fair enough. So that's something I think I've learned to do too, is like just to keep my mouth shut a little bit more when, of course, this doesn't really translate to English, which is a problem at times, but in Japanese, to be less free with my personal information because of things that, like, okay, well, I guess there's a sense like if you're offering the information, then something, you want something to be done about it other than people just to listen to you, that kind of thing. And then of course too, like, you could open your mouth and then you'll have to buy like an extra $60 of souvenirs to bring home for your coworkers, or that's hyperbole, of course, most of the time. But anyhow, so let's move on here. Thank you to Wikipedia for being your awesome self and for sending us a question. Let's see, let's move on to our last question here. This is from Raz Al Ghul, longtime friend of the channel, as is Wikipedia actually. I met them both for the first time 6 years ago, before I came to Japan, and we were all hanging out, I think, like Tokyo Tonight parties or something like that. Viewing parties is not the right way to put it, but like Google Hangouts. And after Tokyo Tonight ended, I met you guys for the first time, I think. So anyway, I'm glad that we can keep that connection, whether it's a small connection or a large connection. Really appreciate you guys being around. So anyway, the feelings. So Roz asks, how do you feel Japan has changed you compared to America if you stayed and not moved to Japan? This is something I talked about a little bit, I think, last week or a couple weeks ago. One of the things I've noticed in myself a lot is the amount of attention I pay to the form of a thing, or the aesthetic thing. And I think the example that I gave at the time was talking about how I design all the promotional materials for my school. And usually it's just like things like, oh, we're having like our Easter week, so, you know, please bring a friend, or the school's going to be closed this day because of it's just our normal schedule, but we don't want to remind you because the school's going to be closed, and that kind of thing. And for me, I'm concerned with like when I'm designing those things, I'm interested in like the color, and I'm interested in like the images that I use, and that's about it. And I want to get each of those things done in about 15 minutes because I don't really have that much time to spend on it. But then the feedback that I get from the school manager is like, well, can you change the font a little bit? Can you make it a little bit bigger, or make it bold, or can you move it just like a millimeter to the side, kind of thing. And when that first happened, I was like, oh, holy shit, like, why, you know? But no, I think spending a little bit extra time to make something a little bit better looking is actually generally worthwhile, depending on what it is, right? Like, if there's something at home and it works and nobody else is going to see it but me, then I don't really care. But the form, you know, the form generally is something that I think about a lot. You can't really see, oh, there's nothing over here actually, but over on this side you can just see Mickey's foot kind of hanging out over here, but there's flowers, there's fresh flowers, there's live flowers, although they're on the opposite end of living, more towards the opposite end of living at this point. There's some ferns and stuff. The area over here is like where the TV and stuff is like there's all like decorations and stuff like that, and something that we thought about how we wanted it to look. Over on that wall there's like some like retro Disney park posters and that kind of thing, and all of that is about form, and it's just something that I never really cared about all that much, you know, about how things look. If I can sit down and I can watch TV, basically if there's a seat and there's a remote, that's good enough for me. I don't really care too much about the environment, or didn't care too much about the environment I was in, I think. That's one thing, is the aesthetics of things. But how else has being in Japan changed me? I think I'm a little bit more concerned about other people than I was. Generally speaking, I am sort of a loner by nature. I love people. I love that I have friends who generally speaking I can pick up with them where we left off in an instant, even if we haven't seen each other in a while, that kind of thing. But I don't think it would be any secret to say, particularly before I moved here, I was a little bit self-obsessed. Part of that was a side effect of trauma, I think. And I think that's something that happens when you are traumatized by whatever, is that you pull inward and it's very hard for you to think about other people. But one thing I realized after I moved here, because there is this, you know, you hear it all the time, like omotenashi, and also there's a common word which is omoyari. Omotenashi means like hospitality without any other reason for being hospitable other than just to be hospitable. So the good of the act is in the act itself, kind of thing. And omoyari means something like having concern for other people or thinking about other people's situation or their feelings and that kind of thing. And I think that's something that I have had to learn about more, because early on in my professional life here, I think maybe of course I was thinking about my kids and I was thinking about my classes, but any of the other things, right, like the politics of talking to parents, or the dealing with like the things that needed to be talked about, or the requests from the powers that be and that kind of thing, I just sort of had a very American response to it. It was like, well, I don't care, not my problem kind of thing, you know. But that's been a really big change for me here, is that thinking about others without any expectation of what's going to come from that, and also just thinking about other situation in general before I make a statement or before I open my mouth generally, before I do anything basically. So that's definitely been a very big thing. I think oppositely though, there is, I imagine it comes from the Buddhist roots of the culture here, but there's very much like this feeling of non-interference. This, you know, like I mentioned it before, where like if you offer a piece of information, like people think, well, if you're going as far as to offer such personal information, probably you want something to be done about it, right? And generally speaking, people don't want to be involved in things that don't concern them, I think. Of course, it's different with family, I imagine, or it has been in my experience to be the case. But there's a oh God, what do you call that? Linguistic de-skilling. But anyway, there's a there's a set of verbs that take on the verb komu to make like a compound verb kind of thing, but compound verb isn't the right way to put it. But anyway, I'm forgetting modal verb. It might be modal verb. But anyway, where basically the idea is to be pulled into something, right? I think it's makikomu. To pull somebody into something, right? To literally wrap somebody inside of your problem, kind of thing. And yeah, that's something you hear often. It's like, oh, why was I brought into this? Or don't bring him into that, or that kind of thing. And that's the thing, is that people want to keep distant from other people's problems. And in Buddhism, that's one of the things, right? Is like this idea of like, whatever will be, so don't really kind of interfere, that kind of thing. At least my understanding of Buddhism. And that's something that actually I've tried to fight against here, because, for example, right, you'll see it like on like a train where like somebody's just being an asshole, or to another passenger because they're drunk or whatever. Or there's like young kids who won't give up their seat and nobody will say anything to those people, so that like a pregnant woman or an old woman can sit down. And people are generally just think like, oh, well, that's shitty, but I don't want to be the one to do anything about it. And that's something I've tried to fight against, is like being kind of dyed in that part of the culture. And it's even like things like garbage. If you see garbage on the street, like there's like people here are like what they would say like keppeki, which is like germaphobes. They don't really want to touch like other people's garbage and that kind of thing. That's a generalization, but yeah. So like garbage will just, if there's like litter, like nobody will pick it up. that kind of thing. That's actually what we're gonna do on one of these one cuppas, is sort of disprove this idea of it being such a completely clean and, like, you know, well taken care of place. It's not the case, but yeah, that kind of thing is to continue making sure that I give a shit, basically. Not to say that people don't, they do in their own way. It's just like, generally people take care of their own, and that means like their employees, their coworkers, their family, their friends. And outside of that circle, there's a very clear line, and you don't want to cross that line because it'll be a bother, or you'll cause a bother to somebody else, and that kind of thing. So yeah, I very much try to avoid being pulled into that part of the culture, I think. So generally speaking, however, I think I've been changed in a positive way since moving here, and I'm very glad I did, to be honest. Every time I see something on the news, I'm like, well, I'm glad I'm here. Not every time, but most of the time. So, thank you very much for you guys sending me your questions. I can't speak very well this morning. Apologize for that. Yeah, it's nice to do these kind of things on occasion. I'm sorry that we can't be out walking today, but given the, as I said, the weather and the situation with the COVID-19, perhaps it can be helped. I do want to say thank you to all of you who have been watching One Cup of Japan since it's come back. I think this is our 6th or 7th episode, which means we are halfway through the season, so to speak. After we get through this season, there's going to probably be like a month or 2 break. There will be other videos going up on the channel, but they won't be One Cuppas. And yeah, it's been really nice to see that people are still interested in these and making interesting, thoughtful comments on the videos. I, of course, also want to say thank you to everybody who supports us over on Patreon. We're now up to 6 patrons over there. And it's great. It's really, really great. Next week, Monday, is the plan right now, which will be April, excuse me one moment as we check this. April 7th, I want to say. April 7th, perhaps. Next Monday, April 6th, Japan time, we're going to have a live show. And I think probably we're going to talk about the continuing COVID problem, but we're also going to talk about Patreon. We're going to talk about Teraha Nihongo, which is a new series that I'm going to be doing on here. And it's an early access series that will premiere first over on Patreon, but we're going to talk about it on here a little bit. We're going to talk about the One Cuppa Deep Roast episodes, which are like the research-based episodes, which will cap off each of these seasons. And then we'll talk about some other random stuff. So feel free to send me questions if you would like them answered, either in the comments of this video or over on Twitter. And I think that's it for today. So thanks always for watching. Let's finish up our cuppa. I've been forgetting to finish the cuppas on these episodes. So anyhow, our coffee is done. Our video is done. Thank you very, very much for watching, guys. Please take care of yourselves during these interesting times, and I will see you all very soon indeed. Cheers.